A really warm welcome to this Uni On Demand event today, where we introduce studying different subjects at university. My name is John Cheek. I'm here from UniTasterDays. I'm delighted today to be joined by Paul Sant, joining us from the University of Law. Paul is going to talk to us about studying computer science, and he's a really great person to do so because he's the head of the School of Computer Science at the University of Law. So how we're going to do this is I'm simply just going to ask Paul a few questions. We're going to do this in interview format. So Paul, if I can just start with a little bit of background to you and what brought you to this point, this role, and what your experience of computer science is.
Hi, John. Yeah, thanks. And welcome, everybody. My name's Paul Sant. As John has already said, I'm head of computer science at University of Law. But I've always been interested in computing, studied it at university, both at undergraduate level, which we're talking about now, and then followed an academic career. So I undertook a PhD in computer science and then took the deep dive as a lecturer in computer science, then moving on through various things, managing a campus in Milton Keynes, for example, but always been passionate about developing student learning. And of course, computer science is fundamental to everything that we do today. And I've been working in computer science for about 20 years now. So it's changed a lot in that time, and we'll explore a little bit about that shortly.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate your time today and that introduction to you. So let me just start, Paul, with the why, if I can. So why might students consider studying computer science at university?
So computer science really is very exciting. It can satisfy those who are very interested, for example, in working with hardware and wanting to put things together. We see things like driverless cars, and there's lots of computers that control that. Lots of power stations are controlled by things. And then we move back, of course, to the really interesting area of computer games. I think we'd be hard pressed to find anybody looking at this video who wasn't interested in computer games of some format. So why would you want to study computer science, and what could you do? Well, really, computer science is an enabler for pretty much every sector that we can think about. It underpins banking. It underpins everything that we do online, be that online shopping through Amazon or various other platforms that we can use. And it really is exciting because you can have a look at lots of different subjects. You don't just have to think of some of the normal areas that might come to mind, like programming or networking. You could be working in business and talking to business professionals about how they could use, for example, ChatGPT, very topical at the moment, to help automate some of the things or to learn about some of the things that they're unsure about. And it really is making waves, be it on mobile platforms, be it on laptops, or be it in cars, aircraft, or pretty much any area of industry today.
Thank you. And it's funny you mentioned about ChatGPT. I smiled to myself when you said it because I used it for the first time last week, and good grief, I was literally blown away. So a shout out there. And also linked to that, Paul, I read a report, I think it's by the Open University, looking at future jobs, and computer science is a huge part of it, whether it is artificial intelligence developing or anything else. So yeah, you can see it's moving with the times. So okay, so that's kind of the why students might want to consider it. So say if a student wants to study computer science and they start a course, say they start a course with the University of Law as an example. Do you want to give us an overview of like what a student might study, what to expect, on the program when they start it?
Expect the unexpected. So, of course, there are some core disciplines that you might expect to undertake when you're studying computer science. Things like, for example, programming, which could involve Python or Java, could also involve web scripting languages like PHP that you might find when you go onto a GoDaddy site, for example, or you create your own website. Databases, all we need to do now is to store lots and lots of information, and data warehouses and databases are a great way of doing that. Computer networking, how we manage to communicate. You and I are not sitting in the same room at the moment. I can be talking to people on the other side of the world, and there's almost no disruption. It's almost instantaneous, very little delays. Of course, cybersecurity has come into the fore in recent days and recent years. But in fact, when you study computer science, beyond those core principles, there are lots of other opportunities and lots of different flavors. So you might have an interest in computer games. So you might be interested in how you can create computer games on the Wii or the PlayStation 5 or whatever platform it might be, or using an emulator if you're old enough like me to be thinking about 8-bit games that I might have played on the Acorn when I was much younger. So there's lots of different opportunities, and you can really, in many courses, choose your flavors. So you might want to choose a specific course, for example, that has a specific title like cybersecurity, where you'll study some core fundamentals, as I've just mentioned, but then also focus very much on the specifics of cybersecurity. So how can we make machines secure? How can we protect them from those unauthorized users? Or you may choose a computer science program that might have some options built in, some what we call pathways sometimes. So you might start off studying computer science in general, and then decide that you're really interested in a networking component or a cybersecurity component or a games component. And many of the providers out there will provide some of those options as you go through your program. And it's okay to change your mind, for example. But the great thing about studying a degree in computer science is that you can pick up all of those, and then you can develop in your spare time, for example, those areas where you might be most interested, where you might find things the most exciting. And I can tell you now, games and cybersecurity are some of the ones that are often popular when I talk to applicants at Open Days.
It's really interesting. Actually, now you say about how fast things are moving, like I remember maybe we're showing our age, but the Acorn as well. And you're thinking, in a relatively small period of time, how things have progressed. And I'd love to, and I'm sure I could probably find computer games I used to play when I was young, and the graphics to us would be then good. But you look
very blocky, Pac-Man and things like that. And for our younger audiences, you can probably go and use Google and find an emulator for Pac-Man and just see the blocks and the squares and how much it's come now, whether you're playing Halo or something like that. It's very realistic. And when we think about augmented and virtual reality and actually being immersed completely, I should have brought my headset today for an Oculus, just so you can kind of see some of that and being immersed and being able to walk around the house, obviously being careful for the objects that are around you. But it's very much lifelike now. And of course, things like virtual reality can be used to teach subjects nowadays. So that can include some computer science if you're building virtual worlds, but also things like biology and medicine. You can go out and buy a t-shirt on Amazon, get your mobile phone and point at a t-shirt somebody's wearing and see the various organs, for example, and get descriptions of that. But also thinking about some of the handsets and teaching surgeons, for example. So lower cost solutions and a much easier solutions when you have large number of students and perhaps even a lecturer who isn't necessarily always in the same room. They could be a very busy person, they could be a world expert who could join up through a headset and be thousands of miles away, and you wouldn't notice any difference in terms of your experience.
Good grief. Right. Well, okay, let's take it on a next step then. So we've kind of looked at why a student might consider computer science. We looked at what to expect on the course. So they want to go ahead and apply. Is there any tips maybe when it comes to what you like to see in a personal statement or in terms of subjects? Is there anything that as someone that's no doubt going to be involved in that process as the head of the school, that you'd like to see if someone was going to apply to computer science?
Yeah, so some tips first of all, maybe about choosing the course, because that's important. Of course, when you're going to university, it's a big decision. I think the first thing to say is it's okay if you find that decision quite difficult. Go to Open Days, go and speak to the people who are there about the course. Choose a course that's going to be exciting and fun. Take a look at the website or the digital prospectus nowadays rather than a physical prospectus, and have a look at the course makeup and have a look perhaps at a number of providers and see how the courses are made up, whether there are opportunities to specialize or choose pathways. And of course, once you've made up your mind and you come to a university and you start studying, there's also an opportunity to be able to change things quite often, especially in the first year, where you might think, I was going to study computer science, but I've been doing this cybersecurity module and I'm really interested in doing that. And we as providers often provide that opportunity to make changes, because we know it's an important decision. It's a decision, however, that people do want to change their minds, and we're happy for that. In terms of the application itself, we're really looking for people who demonstrate passion, who demonstrate perhaps how they engage with technology and computing on a day-to-day basis, what interests them, but also learning a little bit about them beyond kind of computers. So, do they like doing particular sports? Do they like doing particular activities? Do they do something particularly unusual? Do they go bungee jumping off mountains in Australia, for example, on a regular basis, and really trying to make it stand out. So you might, for example, do some work experience. You might have some hobbies, for example. You might even want to say, hang on, here's a nice little web URL, and you can see some of the projects that I've undertaken. And there are lots of platforms out there that you can do that. You might have your own website. You might use something like GitHub, for example, if you've got some software that you want to show off, or if you've got a game, you might provide a link to that game, maybe to the App Store, to Google Play, or whatever it may be. But we're really looking for people who have a real interest and desire around computers, who are inquisitive, for example, and can really demonstrate why they want to come and study.
Love it, Paul. Thank you. And certainly not using ChatGPT to write the personal statement for you as an example. I'd say is one not to do.
Yeah, exactly. We want to know about you, not necessarily about the tools and technologies. You might show us, for example, here's the personal statement I wrote, and here's what fed that into ChatGPT, and this is what came out. But yeah, of course, we're looking for you as a person. And I think I would say, as part of the application, do go and visit institutions. Go and, if you can physically go to that environment. I know it's quite difficult sometimes. There might be large distances to travel, but go and talk to people. Often we as providers will bring students along as well, because that's an important aspect to get the perspective of a student. What's it like to study here? What's it like to live in this particular city or town or country? What's the typical makeup of a week? Will I have some free time? Of course you'll have some free time, and you can do then what you like with that, but really take that opportunity. And many providers now will also have virtual tours of labs, so before you go there you can have a look around at the facilities. Don't be afraid to drop an email. There's often an email address through the applications, and you can write to somebody and say, look, I've got some questions about this course, I'm not sure, or I've got a real interest, or I've been programming since I was 7 years old. Can you tell me a little bit about what additional things I might get from computer programming and a computer science degree? And also, I guess, in terms of the courses, what are the opportunities? And some of the big decisions might be, for example, do you take a standard undergraduate degree, which is typically 3 years in the UK, or do you choose to take a course perhaps that has an industry placement, so you can get that experience? And perhaps we'll explore that a little bit more. But yeah, getting that experience is a really important aspect and differentiates you from the others. But you don't have to do that before you come here. We're not expecting you to arrive with a year's experience, but talk to us. There's no such thing as a silly question. We're always happy to help.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks also for mentioning university events. I'm a massive advocate of university events, and obviously finding out about courses, but also finding out about areas. And a lot of students, when they go to university, are going to live there, so making sure that the area is right for you. So really appreciate you mentioning university events. Right, and this is going to be probably I don't know, will it be the hardest of the lot? But probably of the 4 questions, this is probably the one that is the most open, Paul, because certain things you do at university in terms of courses will lead directly to certain courses, certain jobs in the future. Computer science, I'd imagine, and I'm not an expert, you are, and you'll tell us in a second, is more wide. But can you give us an overview of like potential careers? What might a degree in computer science lead to afterwards for a student?
Yeah, there really are lots of opportunities once you've studied computer science. You may even choose, once you've studied computer science, to go into a non-technical career. You may go and work in business. But some of the careers, well, the traditional ones, for example, maybe a computer programmer. Typically now we talk about people as being software developers or software engineers, where you might develop solutions. Also think about being, for example, a database administrator, somebody who'll go in and manage all of that data that an organization has. Some of the newer careers that are coming out now, you might see data analyst, for example, somebody whose day-to-day job is to work through all of that data that an organization may have and look at ways in which that organization might identify a new market opportunity or a new product opportunity. You could be a games programmer. You could be what we call a business systems analyst, somebody who is that interface between the technical team and the business, because that's a really key translation between what the business wants, which is typically to be able to increase products and productivity, or to look at new marketing opportunities, and how the IT team can provide solutions to help them to do that. You might be a network engineer, for example. You might go there and work with the hardware. You might become a telecommunications engineer. You might go and work for somebody like BT or Virgin Media, PlusNet, for example. You might go and work, for example, as a designer in automotive engineering or electric vehicles, for example. You might go and work as a part of a development team, for example, that might create smart home devices. And what I mean by that, a Ringo doorbell, for example, or a Hive thermometer, all of these things that you can utilize. So really, the careers are broad and wide ranging. I think one of the important things for somebody who's going to think about coming to study computer science at university is that doesn't limit you. It doesn't mean that you have to go and work for the likes of Google or Microsoft. You know, many of those, like Apple, for example, work with smaller providers. You might decide that you want to set up your own business. Okay, you might want to be a games developer, for example, and you're going to spin out your own company. You're going to set out as a sole trader. You know, all of these opportunities and loads of support programs for people in terms of advice, but also in terms of funding, for example. So really, the careers are wide ranging, and you know, you could end up working for one of the big four accountancy firms, for example. You could work for an organization where, you know, it's you and somebody else as the company, for example. You have opportunities to work globally. You know, what we have learned through, recent years is that more and more remote opportunities are available. So you don't necessarily always need to spend all of your time in the country where your organization is. Platforms that we're using now and other platforms out there really do bring people together and provide those opportunities. But broad ranging, hundreds of careers. And I think the one thing to say about computing and IT is that often people will come in with one career aspiration. So they might start off as a software developer, for example, but you can change career. You might have 3 or 4 years where you act as a software developer, and then you decide that cybersecurity is where you want to go, and you can retrain and you can get those professional qualifications that will take it forward. So loads of opportunities out there, and most providers, as part of what they're doing and as part of the courses that they offer, that what we call employability is built in, developing those softer skills beyond being able to be a technical expert. So team working is important, being able to communicate effectively is important, being able to have sometimes difficult conversations with people is important, and how you manage that situation is important. And we embed that as providers into what we do within the modules that we teach, but also in terms of those wraparound, what we call extracurricular or co-curricular activities. And most organizations will have an employability service where you can go and you can get advice on things like your CV, advice upon the experiences and the opportunities that they might provide for part-time work, etc. So really, in terms of careers, the world is your oyster.
Love it, thank you, and great shout out in terms of transferable skills. But also, I think university is the students what they make of it, and there's so many opportunities out there. Whether it's support running your own business, rather than with wraparound clubs and everything else. So really appreciate that, Paul. It's been really handy. Really appreciate your time. I'll just come back to you in a second just to say a final thank you. But just from me, really big thank you to Paul Sant joining us today from the University of Law for this introduction to studying computer science. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. And I wish everybody the best of luck with their applications.